Greetings, everyone, and welcome to SpaceWeek Live, episode 143 on this Sunday, December the 11th, 2022. So, we are hot on the tails of the Artemis 1 Orion splashdown post splashdown press briefing, and I've been trying to juggle that that hours-long stream, with the preparations for this episode, but I think we will be able to make it work. So let's start off with, first of all, if you're not familiar with raw space, all right, I've been hopping, so sorry if I'm a little frazzled. If you're not familiar with SpaceWeek, it is a weekly, basically space news show where I talk about the launches, spacewalks, and other space goings on of the past week, and tell you what you can look forward to in the coming week. So if you have any questions, please make sure to drop them in the chat, and make sure to tag my name at Raw Space to make sure that we see them. The questions will be collated, and I will address them at the end, unless the opportunity presents itself to address a question live. So, starting off with the big news. Uh-oh. Let's get rid of this bar. All right. Starting off with the big news, Artemis. Last Monday, the Artemis 1 Orion spacecraft executed its return-powered flyby burn around the moon, which put it on a trajectory back toward Earth. So it had been in a distant retrograde orbit around the moon, but it had executed a burn a few days previously that set it up to fly by the moon at a distance of about 81 miles, sort of slingshotting around the moon, and with the addition of the return-powered flyby burn, set it on a trajectory to head straight back to Earth. The burn occurred on the far side of the moon, so we couldn't receive any live signals from Orion until a few minutes later. Its return flyby brought it, again, within about 81 miles of the lunar surface, which was not quite as close as its outbound powered flyby, but still pretty close. And remembering that the moon does not have an atmosphere to speak of, there isn't an issue of atmospheric pressure, causing drag on the spacecraft, even at a low altitude. Once it emerged from behind the moon, it started sending pictures like the one you see here, with the thin crescent of Earth rising over the limb of the moon, backlit by the sun. Fast forward 6 days to this morning. This shot was taken when Orion was about 15,000 miles, or 24,000 kilometers away, racing toward the Earth at 6,000 miles per hour. When it left the moon, it wasn't going nearly that speed. The acceleration is due to Earth's gravitational pull. The closer you are to a gravitationally dominant object, the faster you go. Just a short time later, Earth loomed large in Orion's view. Orion approached Earth, moving from south to north. The white continent on the left is Antarctica. On the right, the sun was rising over Australia. You can kind of see the brown of that continent there. And here we see
Orion now traveling at Mach 10.
Now this is played at 2 times speed for pacing, but here we see Orion's descent through the atmosphere. Now this is after it emerged from its what they call the plasma regime. So as here it's performing a turn, basically performed a series of turns during its descent through the atmosphere in order to bleed off speed, which is a standard method used by both capsules and by the space shuttle.
Orion 100,000 feet.
But in any case, it performed a skip maneuver where it actually bounced off the atmosphere as it headed basically straight north toward Baja California from across the Pacific. and it skipped off the atmosphere, and so it had a period of plasma generation as it entered the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere, producing temperatures of up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And I don't have the Celsius off the top of my head. You can do the calculation. And then it re-entered the Earth, so it bounced out, and then it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. It does this to sort of to break up the deceleration of re-entry, so that it's not bearing the brunt of decelerating from 25,000 miles per hour down to a few hundred miles per hour all at once. And so here we see the two drogue parachutes deploying. Now there were only two drogues. I remember someone in the chat saying that they thought there were three. Now there are three main parachutes, but only two drogues. And then a short time later, I'm going to fast forward a little bit.
And we're on mains.
Okay, so there's the, here, poof. There's the mains.
5,000 feet.
And again, this is sped up a little bit just for pacing. And so they begin, the main parachutes, when they're initially deployed, are what they call furled. They're they're bunched up, and then they're gradually unfurled as the craft slows down, so as not to induce damaging levels of load on the chute material itself. I mean, they're tough, they're very robust parachutes, but they don't want to damage them. And here we had our first ground-based shot of the descending capsule under the parachutes. And let me, yep, here we go. This is normal speed. Let me just make sure. Yes. And here is the splashdown.
.500 feet. Splashdown. From Tranquility Base to Taurus Littrow to the tranquil waters of the Pacific, the latest chapter of NASA's journey to the moon comes to a close. Orion, back on Earth.
Congratulations, NASA, Boeing, European partners, everybody who's been involved in the Artemis 1 project. Complete success. From launch through flight, circumnavigation of the moon, distant retrograde orbit, return, and entry, descent, and splashdown. Absolutely perfect all the way around. And so they had Navy ships standing by to assist with the recovery of the capsule. Now, I don't know what their projected timeline is for the crewed capsule, which will be in Artemis 2 and subsequent Artemis missions. Artemis 2 is scheduled for 2024, and that will send 4 astronauts on a similar trajectory around the moon, like this one, except they won't land. And Artemis 3 is currently scheduled for 2025, and that will be our next landing. Now, I don't know what their timeline is for recovering the capsule on a crewed launch, but this time around anyway, they were taking things at a very measured pace. Even 2 hours after the capsule had splashed down and was bobbing in the ocean in the 3 to 5 foot waves, they still had not scooped it up. The ship still had not scooped it up. So I know astronauts are pretty tough, but I for one wouldn't want to be bobbing up and down in the ocean for 2, 3, 4 hours. But hopefully they learn what they need to learn from this go round, and when they actually have people aboard, they can do it a little quicker. I know SpaceX, with the Crew Dragon splashdowns, they attempt to get the crew out of the capsule within about an hour or so. So that is it for Artemis 1. It is done. The capsule, now that it's loaded on the ship, presumably, I hope it's been by now, it will be transported by land across the country back to Kennedy Space Center. They are opting not to load it on the Super Guppy, which is a big bulbous and awkward-looking airplane that can carry oversized cargo. And I don't remember what their stated reason for that was, but in any case, they will be hauling it across the country by land. But in any case, congratulations once again to the Artemis team on a mission completely successful. There were lots of delays, but everything worked the way it was supposed to. In non-Artemis news, last Thursday, SpaceX launched 40 OneWeb satellites from Kennedy Space Center.
T-minus 15 seconds and counting. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, liftoff.
Pitching downrange. M1D chamber pressure is nominal.
Love the colors on that launch. It was just as the sun was setting, so the colors were amazing. The golden hour, as it were. Now, this was SpaceX's first OneWeb launch. Now, the previous launch of OneWeb was by ISRO of India a few weeks ago. Prior to that, all OneWeb satellites had been launched on Russian Soyuz rockets from a variety of launch sites in French Guiana, Kazakhstan, and Russia. Now, OneWeb rides on Soyuz ended abruptly earlier this year when Roscosmos snubbed OneWeb in response to British sanctions against Russia following their invasion of Ukraine. OneWeb is majority owned by the British government, so it's kind of a political thing. But, let's see here.
So you can keep an eye on that stage 1 telemetry 20 in a little under a second, and then the start of that first stage boost back burn. Beautiful views from that camera tracking the Falcon 9.
There we go. Let's check out separation.
And back ignition.
Boost back startup.
Now that is the boost back burn of the first stage as the second stage continues accelerating towards low Earth orbit. The second stage is on the right. First stage is on the top, I guess. And as the boost back burn interacts with as the exhaust plume from the boost back burn interacts with the exhaust plume from the upper stage, they create all sorts of crazy nebulas up in space, which are fantastic to see, especially if they're illuminated by the sun, like after sunset or before sunrise. Now, if we fast forward to the landing, rather than landing on a drone ship, this time they had enough spare fuel to conduct the boost back burn, which you saw earlier, and land on the pad at Landing Zone 1 at Cape Canaveral. Now, if you're familiar with SpaceX launches, anytime there is a boost back burn, that means they're coming back to the pad. If they were landing on a drone ship, they would have continued ballistically and would not need a boost back burn.
You can see the first stage is coming down back towards Landing Zone 1, and we will start our landing burn of that first stage in just about 10 seconds here. You can see the Cape Canaveral coast on your screen
Stage
on the
2,
right.
FTS is saved.
There is that start of our first stage landing burn.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Really incredible views from the first stage.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
And a beautiful landing back at the pad. Now I do want to rewind this a bit. Okay, perfect. All right. Boom. All right, so you see that there, that green glow. That is what that is a substance they use to ignite the Merlin engines called TTEB, TTEB. And it's basically an ignition accelerant. And so that's what the green glow is that you see right before a Merlin engine ignites. Poof. And then there's the standard orange flame of the RP1 fuel. Now here is the tail end of the satellite deployments. There were 40 satellites, and they streamed them all. The bright dots in the background, they are not stars or cities. Those are actually the OneWeb satellites that were deployed earlier in the mission. So they're scattered all over the place. This playback is sped up a bit for pacing, per usual.
OneWeb is at E1 and E5 separation confirmed.
There was the final satellite. So congratulations to OneWeb for finding multiple capable launch partners and for a mission well executed. Now, this is in the wrong place. Let me just fix this real quick. There we go. All right, a little housekeeping there. I was scrambling trying to get all this stuff ready, so please pardon the mess. So on Wednesday, a Chinese Kuaizhou 11 rocket had its first successful launch from Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in the Gobi Desert. On board was the VDES satellite, which stands for VHF Data Exchange System. It will reportedly be used for communications testing and technology verification. Sound on that one. Now, the previous Kuaizhou 11 launch attempt was not successful, but this one did go off without a hitch, so congratulations to that team. And just from the appearance of that launch, that is definitely a solid-fueled vehicle. Thursday, a Long March 2D launched from Taiyuan with the Gaofen 5-1A remote sensing satellite. Now, completing the Chinese trifecta, on Friday, a brand new Smart Dragon 3 solid-propelled rocket, also called Lightning Dragon 3, launched from a sea-based platform in the Yellow Sea. This was the vehicle's first launch. Apparently no... Oh, I messed up my mic levels. Apparently no sound on that launch. Oh, hold on. Nope. So what looks like the rocket shedding its skin or molting is just a bunch of thermal insulation panels that China always likes to wrap around their payload fairings in order to protect the payloads from basically the weather. Now, early this morning at 2:38 a.m. Eastern, SpaceX launched iSpace Mission 1, a Japanese robotic lunar lander mission with no less than 2 rovers, one from Japan and one from the United Arab Emirates.
TMS 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So that single engine.
Now, just a couple of days after SpaceX's previous pad landing, we had another pad landing at LZ-1 at Cape Canaveral, this time in the dead of night.
It will be landing zone 2, or LZ-2, that we will be attempting to land on today. And just shortly after the landing burn begins...
That's LZ-2, I misspoke, sorry.
As we just saw and heard, the Stage 1 vehicle landing burn has begun. We also heard the shutdown of the second stage engine, but let's watch as Falcon 9 touches down for landing with this incredible view here.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Really awesome views there. As you can see, Falcon 9 has touched down on landing zone 2.
And here is payload deployment. Now, since this is a robotic mission, there's no rush to get to the moon. iSpace is expected to land on the lunar surface in April of 2023.
So sit back, enjoy the views, and we'll see you back here in another 5 minutes.
Okay, so that is actually it for the past week. Now, looking further back into space history, well, first let's look back a few hours. A short time ago, just 2 hours after Orion's splashdown, marked exactly 50 years since the last human landing on the moon by the crew of Apollo 17 on December 11th, 1972. Now, I talked about Apollo 17 at greater length in last week's SpaceWeek episode, if you want to check that out. As for this week, I'm going to do things a little bit different because I had, like I said, I was scrambling to get the materials for this episode put together, and I did not have a chance to fully update my calendar, particularly because my browsers were misbehaving while I was trying to both stream the Artemis splashdown and prepare my clips and everything for this episode. So what I'm going to do is keep it full screen, and just read the upcoming launch schedule to you. So let me bring up my calendar. On Monday, December 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC, is anticipated the inaugural flight of ABL Space Systems RS-1 rocket, which has been delayed multiple times, some due to weather, and also a couple of times due to an auto abort that was triggered during the ignition sequence. It will be launching from the Pacific Spaceport Complex on Kodiak Island in Alaska. On Tuesday, December 13th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC, an Ariane Space Ariane 5 rocket will be launching from Kourou, French Guiana, with the Galaxy 35 and 36 satellites bound for geostationary orbit. On Wednesday, December 14th at 4:30 a.m. Eastern, 0930 UTC, is expected the Zhuque 2, the demo flight of the Chinese Zhuque 2 rocket from Zhuquan Satellite Launch Center. Now, that's ZHUQUE. Now, the Zhuque 2 has been scheduled for launch many times these past few months, but it's been repeatedly delayed. So we'll see if this one sticks. Not expecting live coverage of it, but there should be a replay after the fact, which I will have for you in the next SpaceWeek, if it launches. Thursday, December 15th at 6:46 a.m. Eastern, 11:46 UTC, SpaceX launches SWOT, the Surface, Water, and Ocean Topography satellite from JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, from Vandenberg in California. So short distance from JPL to Vandenberg, relatively speaking. Also on Thursday, December 15th, is maybe a Rocket Lab Electron launch of the Virginia is for Launch Lovers mission, which is going to be their first launch from their new launch pad at Wallops Island, Virginia, at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport, or MARS. They've been developing that launch pad for a while. All previous Rocket Lab launches were from New Zealand, where they have two launch pads right next to each other on the Mahia Peninsula on the North Island of New Zealand. Very scenic location, perhaps the most scenic, if not, one of the most scenic launch locations in the world. But this launch will be from Wallops Island, which is where you're accustomed to seeing the Antares rocket launch from, with the Cygnus cargo crafts to the ISS. That's a Northrop Grumman rocket. On Friday, December 16th at 4:21 p.m. Eastern, 2121 UTC, another SpaceX Falcon 9 launch from Cape Canaveral with the O3B mPOWER 1 communications satellite. December 17th, Saturday, at an unspecified time, is supposedly scheduled another Starlink launch from Kennedy Space Center, Starlink 66. However, I believe that SpaceX stated last month that they were done with Starlink launches for the remainder of the year. So there's no time specified on this one, and it would go against what SpaceX stated previously. So I'm guessing that that there will not be a Starlink launch on Saturday, but there could be, so just bear it in mind. And let's see. Okay, let me check NASA real quick. Now, I do have a launch schedule calendar, which, again, I have not managed to update in time for this episode, but I will be updating it later this evening. It's currently at a little after 5 p.m. my time. Let me just make sure there are no non-launch events that I need to mention. Town Hall, Science briefing, pre-launch, rollout. Okay, Wednesday, December 14th, Russian spacewalk 56, with coverage beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's 0200 UTC on the 15th, so 9 p.m. Eastern on the 14th, is the Russian spacewalk 56 to move a radiator from the Rassvet module on the Russian side of the space station to the Nauka multipurpose laboratory module. Now, that spacewalk had been scheduled for a couple of weeks ago, but it got bumped for one reason or another. And so now Sergei Prokopiev and what's his name? Dmitry Patelin? Anyway, Prokopiev and Patelin will be conducting that spacewalk. And that is it for the coming week. I want to take a moment to thank our channel supporters, both old and new, and particularly to welcome Yazata back to channel membership. He used to be a member, but I was demonetized for about 4 months, thanks to YouTube's idiocy, and I finally got remonetized, a few weeks ago. And so thank you once again for joining the crew, the membership crew, Yazata. All right, so let me get to your questions. Did the script do its thing? Sam the Stamp Man. Who is Raw Space? I am me. I'm the guy that owns the channel. I'm just a space enthusiast. I'm not into rockets or spacecraft by trade, but I am by interest. I'm just a passionate enthusiast. All right. Let's see. JRoar123. Let's talk about the numbers. How can Artemis compete with reusable rockets? Plus, SpaceX will inject tons of material into space on a weekly basis. Will Artemis be able to do the same? So I'll take this two-part question in sequence. Can Artemis compete with reusable rockets? So Artemis is not, well, first of all, the SLS rocket is significantly more powerful than even the Falcon Heavy. The Falcon Heavy is about 5 million pounds of thrust. SLS is about 8 million pounds of thrust. And now they both are blown away by the Super Heavy, which is the first stage of the Starship launch system, which is in development. But once it's done, that will produce, what is it? What are they at now? 16 meganewtons, or 16 million pounds of thrust, something like that. Anyway, a lot. However, that system is still in development. They still haven't had an orbital test flight of Starship, and 0 test flights at all, atmospheric or otherwise, of Super Heavy. They haven't tested the landing of Super Heavy or anything. So, they're doing great work on it, but it's not available at this time. And, the Artemis mission, or the Artemis series of missions, has been in development for many years. And so they had to work with the systems that were available at the time and develop using the technologies that they already had. And as you surely know, Artemis reuses a lot of technology from the space shuttle program. The core stage is derived from the space shuttle main fuel tank. The core stage engines are literally the engines that flew on the space shuttle. They're actually flight-proven engines that were expended during the Artemis 1 launch. And a lot of other parts are legacy derived, and if not legacy themselves. But including the SRBs and other things. However, yeah, so the way Congress works, and therefore the way NASA works, is, you know, it works the way it works. I mean, they have their contract interests, their the people pulling the purse strings or holding the purse strings have their own motivations for supporting the Artemis mission, and that usually involve jobs among their constituents. So, SpaceX doesn't provide that. SpaceX is a very capable and competent service provider, but it's not the same kind of thing as the contracts that are tied up in the Artemis program. Now, as for SpaceX injecting tons of material into space, and whether Artemis will be able to do the same, that is not what the SLS rocket was designed for. SLS is a very powerful rocket, but it's also a very expensive rocket. Now, if there were plans for the SLS to launch multiple times per year, then the cost-benefit analysis of whether it's worth it versus reusable rockets would be significantly weighted in the other direction. That is, it would make a lot more sense to use a reusable rocket if SLS was going to launch multiple times per year, but they're only looking to launch maybe once per year. And so reusability is, I mean, if it costs them almost as much, like think of the space shuttle. Sure, the space shuttle was reusable, but it cost a huge amount of money to refurbish the thing for every launch. It was like over $1 billion, maybe a couple $1 billion even just to refurbish a space shuttle for each launch. And so it was expensive even though it was reusable. Now, the difference with Starship is that it's specifically designed to be reusable without significant refurbishment, like reusable basically immediately, almost like an airplane. But as for whether it can live up to that aspiration, I guess time will tell. But Artemis could launch lots of material into orbit, but it won't because it was not designed for that, and it would be cost prohibitive for it to do so. Artemis is firmly targeted at the moon, and potentially beyond. It is not targeted for, like the commercial launching of satellites and things like that. Morgan E. Wolf. What are you looking forward to most in the new year, space-wise? Well, we are now officially in between Artemis missions. We've seen the end of Artemis 1, the successful end, and therefore it's reasonable to expect that Artemis 2 won't be particularly delayed. So that's coming in 2024, which means next year will be no more Artemis. We'll just be in between missions. So next year, I would say the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is watching Starship fly, which was probably also the thing I was most looking forward to this year, and possibly even the year before. Once Starship flies successful,ly if it can do so reliably, it will be an absolute game changer. But first, they need, all the regulatory stuff, I's dotted and T's crossed, and, engineering polished off, and the system's built. So once they conduct that first orbital test flight, if it's successful, then that will be a an even bigger moment than when they first landed their first stage Falcon 9 booster, or the Grasshopper, I think is what the prototype that it was first called. But that's my biggest thing I'm looking forward to this coming year is the flourishing, hopefully, of SpaceX Starship and Super Heavy. All right. Denise Campbell, Raw Space, and anyone else who might know, when does Eileen Collins' memoir hit bookstores? I am unaware. Can probably Google that, but maybe if there's an Amazon listing for it, they might have a projected release date, but I am unfamiliar with that. All right. So, any other questions? Now I'm caught up in the queue. Oh, JRoar123, why was I demonetized? This channel has always been a thorn in the YouTube Partner Program's side because I present a mix of content. I do a lot of restreams of live, like launch broadcasts from SpaceX and NASA, et cetera, et cetera. And I also do my own stuff. I have my weekly SpaceWeek episode. I have edited videos that I publish and whatnot. But because primarily of my launch streams, of which there are many, dozens per month, SpaceX demonetized me for reused content. They felt that I did not add value to the content to a sufficient degree to warrant staying in the YouTube Partner Program, even though I had been monetized for over 2 years. And getting monetization back in 2020 was difficult because I was demonetized twice back in 2019, 2020, as I was first trying to get the monetization going, and it stuck. But then 2 years later, they yanked the carpet out. So I've changed the way I do things. I've tried to add more information around the stream, like the top banner with informational ticker or whatever, ticker text. The sidebars with like live views and trackers and things like that. Doing what I can to try to add value in the eyes of the YouTube Partner Program team, such that they don't feel that I am yet again no longer worthy of retaining my monetization. So whatever. But now that I've got the monetization back, hopefully it can at least pay for itself. That is to say, hopefully the channel isn't a net drain on my finances, because there are a number of costs associated with running the channel. Everything from Adobe Creative Suite to my podcast host to virtual mailbox and other services. But all right. Anything else? Yazata was really happy to see William Shatner, Captain Kirk, go to space. Yeah, that was a trip. That was fun to see. Oh, and speaking of people going to space, I guess the big non-launch news, or whatever space program news of the week was that Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, was among the chosen individuals to go on the SpaceX Dear Moon mission whenever that launches. So that's pretty exciting for the space geeks out there, for one of their own to be on the crew manifest. So congratulations to Tim for that. We were talking about it earlier in chat, and upon reflection, it occurred to me that the choice of Tim for that flight made a lot of sense, because he's basically how did I phrase it? There is no more prominent figurehead for the new space media than the everyday astronaut. He's kind of at the top of that stack, so that makes sense for him to go. And he is a career photographer, so Mr. Dodd, we'd better have some killer video and pictures when you get back, which I'm sure we will. All right. Anything else? Michael Parks is unsure what the whole monetized, demonetized thing even is. It simply means, so the monetization of a channel simply means that that channel is eligible to get revenue. And now the revenue can come from a few different places. If a stream is, or if a video or a stream is monetized, then the people who view that stream or video will see advertisements, and then those advertisements result in, you know, some small percentage of ad revenue for the streamer or the person who posted the video. Now, not all videos are monetized, so most of my launch streams and event streams are not monetized, because unless I myself am on the video and presenting something, I'm not. It would be unethical of me to try to claim monetization on that, and so I don't enable monetization unless I'm actually like hosting the event or whatever, or doing this live. Also, I recognize that people don't like ads, and so I try to minimize it as much as I can. There's also super chats and super stickers, which are basically one-time donations that you can do in live chats. And are there other ways? Well, within the YouTube platform, there's also merch that gets merchandise, because there's like a merch shelf that appears on videos, and I could put like a highlighted merch item like a t-shirt or a mug or something in the live chat, but it just doesn't occur to me because I'm busy talking, busy actually presenting the material. But in any case, monetization of a channel simply means that the channel is eligible to earn revenue. Now, while I was demonetized for those four-ish months, I still had Patreon, which is an external website. You know, it's patreon.com/rawspace. And so I had a few members there, but not enough to match the operating costs of the channel. So fortunately, we're back to monetization. Oh, and the other main method on YouTube is channel membership, of course, which Yazata has rejoined today. Okay. So, anything else? Tim's going to the moon. Yeah. All right. So, looks like we're all caught up. That'll wrap up for this week. Thank you all so much for coming, and I hope to catch you in the next live stream. Till then, keep it raw, and Bennu says bye-bye.